Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy and Postnatal Entrepreneurs Collective podcast in conjunction with your Birth Biz. I'm your host, Niamh Cassidy, IBCLC, antenatal educator and business coach to birth and postpartum workers. So have you ever read a marketing tip and thought, I literally can't do that? Well, guess what? You're not alone. I don't think I've met a single birth worker who wouldn't be able to say that. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately and why that is. And I put up a poll on Instagram to ask people, would I cover the topic as a blog or podcast? And you voted for podcast, so here we are today. Most generic marketing advice was written for people selling software or shoes or supplements or something else that isn't the care that we provide. And Birthwork sits in a completely different context about how we can and how we should market to the group of people who we want to serve. And if you've ever tried to apply standard business tactics to your doula practice or your lactation consultancy, you've probably found that you're coming up against a bit of friction for yourself in doing that. And I know that that was my experience as I was trying to grow my business as well. And I was finding that a lot of the advice that I was hearing out there that I just either couldn't do, like it was a complete no, as in that it's completely against my ethics or my moral standpoint to market this way, or I would maybe like say, okay, well, that's what the business people are saying, so I'm going to give that a go. And either it wouldn't work or it wouldn't feel right, or both, typically both, to be honest. So today we're going to talk about why do things feel like that, why this advice isn't right for us, and I'm going to go through 5 reasons why birthwork marketing is genuinely different, because I don't want you to feel like you're doing something wrong or that you're not cut out for this, or that there's no marketing that works in this industry, because there is. So let's dive into reason 1. Reason 1 why I believe birthwork marketing is different to traditional or general business marketing is that our ethics are supercharged. We are marketing to people at peak vulnerability. So they're pregnant, they've just given birth, or they have a newborn. And for me, this makes them a vulnerable person. So I used to work in social care, and we would talk about our clients being vulnerable people. So in our legislation, it talks about people with intellectual disabilities being vulnerable people. But even in social care, we would also include people who were in secure housing or who were in drug addiction as vulnerable people. And I think that pregnant and postpartum families are also vulnerable people. And the emotional stakes are like, they're so different to any other type of service. Like if you're going for a massage or to get your hair cut or something like that, they're all nice things. But those emotional stakes that are there for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum just aren't there for most service providers. So when we're considering what kind of marketing strategies to use, we have to take all of this into account. And that's not something that most people have to do. And it's not something that most business people teach. And something that we see a lot in traditional marketing and creeping into the birth industry as well is that fear is a powerful marketing lever. And if we're honest, the birth and baby industry uses it relentlessly. So are you sure your baby's safe? If you want your baby to be safe, if you want them to grow well, if you want them to do this, like emotion and fear is used quite frequently in selling products specifically to pregnant and postnatal people. But also I'm seeing it creeping into some birth work, which I don't feel is the right way to go. And I don't think that it's necessary. And I know that most of the birth workers that I work with are consciously trying to avoid getting into fear-based marketing, which in a way then they're like, well, what else can we use? Because this is something that people talk about so freely, about using those kind of emotional triggers and genuine fear to bring in clients. And not only do I feel that it's not ethically or morally appropriate for us to use fear-based marketing, we also have a lot of other ethics in how we have to market. A lot of us may be subject to the ethical obligations of our qualification that other industries simply don't have. So, for example, in being a lactation consultant, adhering to the WHO code of the marketing of breastfeed substitutes, and then other, doula associations and different organizations will have codes in way that they expect their members to behave or not behave. And that's really appropriate as far as I'm concerned, because we are dealing with that vulnerable group and we need to keep our safeguarding awareness really, really high. And lastly, in relation to ethics, and I mean, there's a million more things we could discuss, but in the interest of time, a lot of what we talk about is consent and informed consent. And we build our professional ethos around around pregnant and postnatal people being able to make their autonomous decisions with appropriate information. And that doesn't really match up with kind of fear or persuasion based marketing, where you're trying to sway someone into something that maybe they don't want or need. So the result is that we're playing a game with one hand tied behind our back. So we're trying to do all of this marketing stuff, but some of the stuff just isn't appropriate for our industry. And that's the right thing for us to do. The right thing for us to do is to not employ these tactics. But it is important that we acknowledge that marketing in this space is more challenging for these reasons. So the second reason is that connection is everything. Now, all of traditional marketing will talk about building a connection with potential customers or with clients. So it's not different in the fact that connection is important, but the level of connection that is necessary for us is on a completely different level. So if someone wants to buy a product, they might connect with the influencer and think, oh, they've recommended some good things before, I'll take their recommendation. Or they might identify with the person. They might feel like, well, I'm in the same age group as her, so therefore I might buy that product. And they might be buying on personality, or they might be buying on the promised results. But in the work that we do, people aren't just buying a product, or they're not just choosing a service, again, like maybe getting your sink fixed or your hair done. They're choosing a person to be present or involved in or support them with some of the most intimate and significant moments of their life. So whether we're antenatal teachers working with people in a group before their babies are born, they're pregnant, they're trusting us with some level of their care. Whether if we're a doula, if we're a birth doula who's literally in that birth space with women, then that connection that we're creating is so much more powerful than nearly any other industry connection that people are trying to connect with. So those significant life moments, from preparing for your birth, from having your baby, from breastfeeding your baby. I walk into people's houses and they've never met me before. And within maybe not within 2 or 3 minutes, within 10 or 15 minutes, I might be seeing their breasts. And they would never consider that in any other context, that within 10 or 15 minutes of meeting somebody, that they would be showing them their breasts. So what we do and how we connect with people is super important, because we need to be able to be trusted with that connection. People are very vulnerable, as I mentioned in the previous section. So we need to make sure that we are connecting with people on a truly human level. And that even includes in our marketing. So before we ever meet them, we want to be able to connect with them on a truly human level. And that we all talk about the know, like, and trust factor. And it's important for every business. But for us, it's really dialed into the maximum. Like, it's just so important that people feel connected to us if they're going to choose us to be that person with them during these vulnerable times. And not only does it help with that choice, I feel that it's imperative that we're willing to give of ourselves, so that people can feel that connection and feel that there are people out there who they can trust, who will be part of their space, their worlds, their family space. So this really means that, when we're looking for new clients, when we're creating our content, whatever that may be, that it can't just be informational. Like, tips and facts are actually really helpful in getting people to start following you and to start connecting with you. But we also need to allow people to feel like they can get to know us as humans as well. So your personality, your values, your way of seeing birth and postpartum, that is your marketing, whether you frame it that way or not. It also means that we need to consistently show up over time, because people need to get to know us, and they need to get to know us quickly, which will be in the next point. But we have to show some level of consistency. We have to show that we're there. We have to show, as I said, different aspects of ourselves so that people can feel comfortable in taking that next step with us. So reason 3, which I alluded to a minute ago, is that our window of opportunity of working with someone is very, very small. Our potential clients, they're not just a niche, they literally have an expiry date. So if our services are focused on pregnancy only lasts 9-ish months. And the amount of time within that the parent is possibly considering a service for like ours is even smaller. So, like, if we think about even the coaching industry, even what I'm doing now, as well as the birth work, a lot of people will build relationships with people over 12 or 18 months before they'll ever sign a contract for coaching, in particular for one-to-one coaching. Whereas in the work that we have to do, we're trying to get people in a really short space of time. Like, that window is really, really tiny that we have to get them to know, like, and trust us and to want to work with us. So the time to reach our potential clients, build trust with them, get the inquiry, book them in, and actually deliver our service is really, really short. And it also means that we're in a constant cycle of finding new clients, because unlike a gym or a therapist or a hairdresser, most clients don't stay forever. And yes, we might get some repeat clients. They might come back on future babies, or depending on how we have our services, we might serve them in pregnancy and then for a period postpartum. But for the most part, we are we're replacing our clients all the time, because when that baby is born, our job is done. So we're looking for new clients all the time, or when that baby starts feeding effectively, that job is done. And all of this puts real pressure on our visibility, because we need people to find us generally somewhere in early to mid pregnancy to really get enough time to get them to book in whatever our typical service may be, or in the late pregnancy period if we're a postpartum service. But we're trying to get them as early as possible so that we have more time to build up that know, like, and trust factor. So reason 4 is that the buying competition is fierce. And I don't mean that we're in competition with each other, because if you know me at all, you know I talk about community over competition. And I do believe that there is genuinely enough pregnant people out there for the amount of birth workers that are available. But what I do mean is that expectant and new parents are one of the most heavily marketed groups on the planet. The baby product industry is enormous, and it's selling like real tangible things that people can see outside. So the pram or the monitor or all the 10,000 gadgets to help your baby sleep that you can get on Amazon. They're things that people, they're told, this will help you, this will make you a better parent, this will make your life easier. So all the things that they're afraid of. So parents are afraid of not being able to sleep. They're afraid of their baby getting wind. They're afraid of their baby not being safe. So there's a lot of marketing around all of these gadgets that are going to help your baby sleep. The pram that's going to be the most comfortable pram for your baby and the safest pram for your baby. So these are all things that are tangible, and the parents can say, I've got the pram, I've got the noise machine, I've got the rocker, and they can tick them off a list and say, okay, and they can see them there in their spare room waiting to get used. And they can feel like they've done something, like it's really, really tangible. Whereas what we are providing is a lot less tangible. So, our support, our knowledge, our presence, being with them, that's much harder to sell in a crowded market to a group who are being bombarded with ads and with information around all of these things they're supposed to do to make their babies safe or their life easier. Because they're being constantly told that they must have this before the baby arrives. And in mainstream marketing culture discussion, professional support rarely makes that list. I have a post that I put out every few months, and it says something along the lines of parents need support, not stuff. So I am trying to champion that line that parents need support, not stuff. But at the moment, those big marketing budgets of the baby industry are a lot louder than me, and they're selling stuff. And nearly everyone's budget is finite, to an extent. And budget fatigue is real. And by the time someone has bought the cot and the car seat and the pram and the noise machine and the blankets and whatever else that is being marketed to them at the moment, the pump, um, whatever it is, spending on a doula or a lactation consultant or even a private antenatal class can feel like a luxury. Now, when we know it's not, but it can feel like that when people have already all of these outgoings to prepare for their baby. So your marketing has to do the work of helping people understand what they're actually getting by having support or a service from you, and why it matters to them, to their baby, to their family, to their future, more than another gadget it is going to help them. So in that sense, we're coming at it from a different perspective, and it's a little bit harder. It's harder than selling the tangible thing. It's a lot easier to say this gadget is going to help your baby sleep, whereas we're coming in and saying, I'm going to give you some gentle support, and I can hold your baby while you get some sleep. But a gadget seems like, it's a one and done purchase, and it just seems a lot easier to kind of tick off the list. So we are working a lot harder to try and help people understand the benefits of the services that we provide. So the last reason why birthwork marketing is harder, I believe, is because women's work isn't valued. And that's the reality of the world that we're living in. And this is kind of multi-layered. So in the first layer, we have the fact that mothers aren't valued. So postnatal support through public systems in most Western countries is non-existent, and not even through public systems, even through familial systems is non-existent. And the message women receive culturally is that they should cope, bounce back, and just be able to get on with it because everybody else could. And that has done a disservice to women for generations, probably since the Industrial Revolution. And unfortunately, it's probably starting to get a little worse with the rise of trad wife content, with far right narratives around motherhood. Like, really, in some ways, they're romanticizing motherhood and the value of motherhood, but also at the same time diminishing the actual experience of new mothers and the struggles that they have and the support systems that they have. So what all this trad wife stuff, we're seeing, these lovely, beautiful pictures of these gorgeous families, and the woman is maybe cooking dinner and she's blissful, happy, and she's lovely and skinny, and she's got her makeup on and she looks good. And people are seeing that and thinking, should that be me? Is that, I'm sitting here in my pajamas and I haven't showered in 3 days, and we've ordered a takeaway for the 7th day in a row. Like, it must be because I'm doing something wrong. And when society is reinforcing that message to women that their struggles aren't real, or that they aren't worthy for support, or it's because they're not good enough, they're not a good enough woman, they're not a good enough mother if they can't do all of these things on their own, then when that's what society is telling these women, it's harder for them to justify spending any money on support, because there's this idea that they should be able to do it by themselves. Whereas we know the reality is that in all traditional societies, women were supported by a whole community of other women when they had babies. So nobody was doing it on their own. If we really genuinely wanted to be a trad wife, we'd be having all of this community support. But when the culture is telling the women, and not just the women, but their partners, that, you should be able to do all of this by yourself, the idea of spending money on support can can be hard. So then the other layer to this about women not being valued and how it makes marketing harder for us is that birthwork in and of itself is, women's work or care work, with the implication being that it doesn't require skill or training or fair compensation. This idea that all care work should be provided for free. And if we did have that village that I talked about a minute ago, then that care work would be provided by free by the other people in the village. But in the society that we live in, we never expect traditional men's work. That could also be seen in the past would have been part of the community work. So carpentry or house building or plumbing, if we were talking about, a village type life, then again, all of those services would have been provided for free by the men in the village. Someone would have been good at this, someone would have been good at that's what would have happened. Whereas when it comes to roles that are more traditionally women led, there seems to be this idea that we just shouldn't get paid, or that we should be happy to do it for free. And a lot of that is cultural, because what I'm talking about, that women aren't valued. And then some of it also comes from some of the countries, like, so where I live, where we have a public health system. So there are some services, so like your midwife and your obstetrician is free to the woman. They're not paying directly for it, but the people doing those jobs are getting paid. And a lot of people forget that. And we can see that even within the industry itself, that sometimes, for example, I'll go with this one. So like public lactation consultants, ones who are being paid by the state to be a lactation consultant, can sometimes look down on those of us in private practice for charging that much money for a lactation visit. But they go to work every day and they get paid regardless. They get paid holidays. Whereas people think that the amount of money that we're charging is a per hour, and therefore if we work 40 hours a week, we're making all these millions. But they're not factoring in the fact that we have to travel, that we have to market, that we have to do our notes, that we have to do our booking systems. You know what I mean? Like, so none of that is taken into account sometimes, because again, we think, either women shouldn't be charging for this kind of work, or they shouldn't be charging that much. And all of that makes it really hard for people to charge appropriately, to be taken seriously, and to feel confident in marketing yourself without feeling like you're being pushy about, something that should be free. And when we take those two things together, so the fact that mothers aren't valued, and then the fact that women's work isn't valued, they compound each other. And the client feels that she shouldn't need the help. You feel that you shouldn't have to sell. And both of these feelings have the same cultural root. And it's worth naming this specifically in your content, because your audience will recognize it and resonate with it as well. And it really does position you as someone who genuinely understands the landscape that you're operating in. And sometimes it's those little seeds that we're planting for people that does allow them to open up the idea that maybe they are worthy of support, and maybe that paying for that support is, an appropriate and good and positive thing to do. Because we're fighting the good fight here, ladies. There is a lot that's going against us in the world at the moment. But what we know is that women and families need us now more than ever. People are more isolated than they've ever been, and they need that support in pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. So we can't give up, and we can't say, oh, this doesn't work, so there's no point in doing it anymore, because there are ways to reach clients and to get a lovely client base and to get those repeat referrals. Because none of what I've talked about just now means that marketing is impossible. It just means that our approach needs to be built for the industry that we're working in specifically, and not in the generic type of industries that we get a lot of our advice from. This is really what I do in your birth biz, is supporting people with all of this and everything else that comes with running a business. And it's why I set it up. It's why I set up the businesses, because I don't want any more birth workers quitting because you feel that you can't make the business end work. I've seen too much of that and I don't want to see it anymore. So if you need support in your business, please be brave enough to reach out for support, because that's exactly what we want our clients to do, is to reach out for that support when they need it. Well, thank you very much for joining me again this week. And if you have any questions or you would like any of my free resources, just send me a DM on Instagram. That's probably the best way to get me, or pop onto the website and have a little look around. And please, if you can, I would absolutely love if you would leave a review of the podcast wherever it is that you're listening, and do make sure that you are subscribed or following. It really does make sure that you get all the next episodes, and it helps other people find the podcast as well. Well, thank you very much.